This is an Audio Wool original.
This episode of Frightday is brought to you by Gates of Hell Chipotle Hot Sauce by Frightday. Bold chipotle flavor blended with habanero peppers for just the right burn. Kissed with garlic and passion fruit. Zero human blood, like none at all. Visit shop.frightday.com before the first batch disappears.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. If you'd like to support us, go to patreon.com/frightday.
Cryptids and conspiracies.
Fuck. Alright, here we go.
You're going to have to hear all my jokes again.
Keep it down.
Hold on, so let me just check. Like, this is peaking.
Too loud.
Right, I was doing it on purpose. This is not peaking.
Normal,
We're okay
that's
here.
a normal audio
We're good
level.
Here.
Yeah.
We're good here. Okay, I'm going to try not to get too excited. I'm going to get excited.
Oh, no.
Hey, Byron.
Yeah.
What do you know about Lemuria?
Oh, you mean the Buffalo indie pop band with punk rock tendencies formed in 2004 by Sheena Azella and her cousin Alex Kearns?
It sounds so confusing. No.
It's an incredible band.
But they are named after something that I'm interested in, which means they probably have a passing interest in it.
No, I think they probably do.
You've heard of Atlantis.
Yes?
Lemuria is Atlantis's cousin. But the father of Lemuria, instead of being wild conspiracies, the father of Lemuria is a scientist, Byron. And this is what makes Lemuria so special. So tonight, we're going to get into it.
Again.
And we are going to, yep. And because you didn't like that I yelled.
The audio quality was insufficient for publication, Kelly.
Well, you have a different standard for that than I do.
It was
but
like
I respect that about you.
The whole time.
I mean, I get really excited about some
I
things.
know, but excited to hear this again.
So with that in mind, we are going to start with everybody getting a baseline understanding of what lemurs are, so that then we can move on to what Lemuria was named for, and then we can start getting into the crazy shit.
Do we need to call Wes?
I actually would love to know if Wes has anything to do with lemurs. I'm sure he does.
All right, well.
God, that'd be great. We
Save
really
it
should
for
just have him on retainer.
On speed dial, honestly.
Yeah, no joke. All right. Lemurs. Can you physically describe lemurs for me, por favor?
Last time I did this, I struggled. I'm going to do it again.
Do better this time.
It's like a combination of a monkey and a rat, a thin raccoon, gray, brown, white, black, yellow eyes.
They're a little spooky looking. They're weird. And they're named actually after, loosely, a Roman word for ghosts. Lemures. Okay? Here's a little bit better background for that, because we like ghosts on this show. Encyclopedia Britannica describes lemures from Roman mythological belief as follows. Lemures, also called larvae, in Roman religion, wicked and fearsome specters of the dead, appearing in grotesque and terrifying forms. They were said to haunt their living relatives and cause them injury. To propitiate...
Boy, why are they haunting their relatives?
Because they're pissed that their relatives are still alive and they're not.
Jealous, right?
Super jelly. To propitiate... I believe that's how you pronounce that. To propitiate these ghosts and keep them from the household, ritual observances called Lemuria were held yearly on May 9th, 11th, and 13th. This ancient feast was also called as Lemuralia or Lemuria. According to the Ovid, the Lemuria is derived from the Rumeria, a festival instituted by Romulus to appease the spirit of his murdered brother Remus. Now, you probably know Romulus from Succession, because that is what our favorite character is named after.
Who's
in
our favorite
Succession.
character?
Roman?
I don't know about Roman being my favorite character.
Okay, well, he's my favorite character, and his actual name is Romulus, which his really creepy, weird father named him after the Roman Emperor, Romulus?
Yep.
Okay, all right. So during this festival, Byron, the head of each household was supposed to get up at midnight, wash his hands 3 times. 1, 2, 3. So this is like birth of OCD too, maybe. I don't know.
Right.
Could be.
I don't know about that.
Then he would
just ritual.
walk around the house barefoot and throw black beans over his shoulder while reciting the following 9 times. Haec ego mito, His redimo meke meoske fabis. This phrase means, with these beans, I redeem me and mine.
With these beans, I thee wed.
This actually, it is so hard. I know you don't want me to do this, but like Brack has the best song on beans.
You've mentioned it about a dozen times.
I know, and I really need you to play it right now.
You want me to play the Brack Beans song?
I do.
From
We just
Space
talked
Ghost
about
Coast to
beans.
Coast? Anytime I say,
I love beans. Woo!
I
love beans. How about you?
I and
I'm
Fiber.
indifferent. I think they're fine.
Right, go ahead and put them. I do really like beans. Another part of this festival involved 2 Vestal virgins who would prepare this salsa, which was actually just a salted flour, and it had to be made from the very first ears of corn, from the very first pieces of wheat collected for the harvest season. It was sprinkled on animals, and then those animals were sacrificed.
Beans and salsa so far.
Which is weird because it's Roman.
Huh.
Yeah. The ceremonial altar also had this quote-unquote salsa, which was actually just salted flour sprinkled on it. And then on May 13th, the second ritual included the practice of throwing images. This is really weird. Throwing images. So back in Roman times, obviously, we did not have photographic images.
Yeah.
So we're talking like, I don't know, like sketches on urns, maybe? Like relief carvings, paintings, perhaps.
Some sort of artistic representation.
Of men, old men specifically, from the Pons Sublius into the Tiber River. So they took these images, stood on a mountain, threw them into the river. There were public events that included honoring Mars, a ton of other ceremonies. The whole point in me describing all of these very elaborate proceedings is to help you understand that Lemures were a very feared and significant part of Roman culture at this point, and calling the animal lemurs carried a lot of weight with it because it represented a lot of the uncertainty, mystery, and fear that surrounded that ceremony. Like, they were so scared of these ghosts that the entire month of May became totally unlucky, and they would basically spend the whole month trying to exorcise evil spirits.
Yeah, but why would they name the lemur the lemur?
Because it looks, Byron,
Because
like
it
a
looks
spooky ghost.
All right.
Ooh.
You peeked it again.
Sorry.
Great. I mean, it's kind of a small primate-looking thing with a fox face.
It has the dark eyes that look a lot like maybe the eye cavities of a skull,
Sure.
mayhaps.
A lemur could be in a Madagascarian death metal band.
Are we talking about King Julian?
Don't know what you're talking about.
You really didn't look it up? King Julian from Madagascar.
No.
I
no,
like
we're
to
not
move it. I like to move it. You're getting the jokes again. There's no way around it. You're getting the jokes again.
I hate this.
I was proud of my jokes. Also, another reason that they named them lemurs is because they are nocturnal,
Okay.
like ghosts.
Well.
They are slow and they have very creepy, weird movements that would be a little bit like maybe something that would scare me, but not you in a horror movie, of like a ghost moving in the darkness that like creeps in a weird way. That
Doing like a jerky head
the type of
thing.
stuff that freaks me out.
Yeah.
I still think it's mostly about the giant eye sockets on ghostly skulls, but whatever.
Okay. Whoops.
And Byron, in the document that I shared with you last time that you didn't bother to open,
Still
but this
didn't
time
pull it
you're
up.
going to open, you can note that there is a picture of a fantastic Roman mosaic with one such skull that became very inspirational for naming lemurs.
Where are you sending it? Email.
In the process of researching lemures, or larvae, the spooky ghost creatures from Roman times, I did discover a historical fiction book, a mix of this weird Roman festival and zombies. It's called Bello Lemures Against Zombies Amorica. Highly recommend. We will have a link to it on Amazon.
Is this like a Pride and Prejudice and zombies?
No, I get the sense that it's much better than that. It looks really cool.
All right.
Haven't read it. So, Byron, you fully understand where lemurs come from.
I mean, they existed
Where the name
before
of
they had
lemurs.
a name. Okay.
Yes, where the name came
But
from.
yes.
Right. Okay. Now for the history of Lemuria. This topic originates in a place that you don't often see as an origin spot for Captain Kelly's cryptids or conspiracies. It started with a very respected mainstream scientist.
I wish you would stick with those.
Nope, it's very uncomfortable for me, but we'll get out of here soon. Philip Sclater, who was born in the 1820s, Oxford-educated lawyer and zoologist, back in the day when people had like 12 different academic preferences.
It was hustle culture.
Yeah, oddly, but like all entitled hustle culture, I guess. I don't know. It's very weird. He established 6 major zoological regions in a paper that he published when he was only 29 years old. These 6 regions, Palearctic, Ethiopian, Indian, Australasian, Nearctic, and Neotropical are actually still used by scientists today. So again, just reiterating, mainstream, commonly accepted scientist. He was really interested in birds, amassed a collection of 9,000 of them, which he donated to the British Museum when he was in his 50s.
Dead or alive?
Dead birds.
It's a lot of dead birds.
Beyond these contributions to natural science, he worked to explain a mystery surrounding the location of, you guessed it, lemur fossils. This is a side note, but important because I like to be very accurate, or as accurate as I can be. A detail that I don't hear discussed when this story is told, his term lemurs, he was using to include other primate groups as well. When he and other zoologists at the time were trying to figure out why there were lemur fossils in Madagascar and India, despite the ocean that lay between them, they were actually considering other related primates that are now no longer considered lemurs, but for simplicity's sake, lemurs as of the 1860s.
Oh, okay.
Which includes currently known as lemurs and some other things too. Right. So he's like, wait a second, this is weird. And not just him, but a bunch of people. We've got lemur fossils in Madagascar. We've got lemur fossils in India. There's a giant ocean between them. We have never seen King Julian build a boat. So we think there had to have been a reason that these lemur fossils were in both places. What was that reason? And as science is known to do, he made a hypothesis to explain that. And this hypothesis came in a paper called The Mammals of Madagascar, which was published in the Quarterly Journal of Science in 1864. Sclater solved the mystery.
The anomalies of the mammal fauna of Madagascar can best be explained by supposing that a large continent occupied parts of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans, that this continent was broken up into islands which some have become amalgamated with Africa, some with what is now Asia, and that in Madagascar and the Massereni Islands we have existing relics of this great continent, for which I should propose the name Lemuria.
Nailed it. Thanks, B. That was great.
You're welcome.
Now, in reality, the existence of a lost continent/land bridge that had sunk somewhere in the Atlantic and Indian Oceans actually started 20 years before Sclater published this paper. So he was kind of plagiarizing. There was a guy, another scientist, Etienne Geoffroy Saint-Hilaire. Hilaire.
Don't just say it weird because you don't know how to say
Yeah,
it.
that's how I do it.
Oh.
It's okay because you can appropriate the French. It's not a problem right now.
Yes.
Who was also looking to explain Madagascar/India connections. Sclater kind of stole the idea from him and gave it a name. So the only thing that Etienne had not done was give it a name. Sclater's like, I'm taking that and I'm putting a cool name on it. I'm saying Lemuria. We're calling it Lemuria, and I'm publishing this paper. But people were trying to explain the reason for these distant lemur fossils for a long time. This is the key part, Byron. Of everything that I've said so far, this is the part you need to understand the best. For 100 years almost, the mainstream scientific community accepted this idea that there was a land bridge or continent between Madagascar and India.
And initially they had broken apart because islands are just floating.
Well, but here's what's really interesting. At this time, we did not understand continental drift or plate tectonics. Yep. So they didn't understand that things split and moved dramatically. So they thought it had to be there and it just sunk. So now we've got a sunken Lemuria along with Plato's idea of a sunken Atlantis. But the sunken Lemuria came from Philip Sclater, scientist.
Well, but what about when he said that the continent was broken up into islands? And
slight movement like earthquakes because they had experienced earthquakes, right?
But they noticed those differences.
Right. They didn't
That's
know.
a cool bike.
It's a terrible bike.
It's a cool motorcycle.
It's a terrible bike.
Why are we recording on the porch, Kelly?
Because we're trying to build our resilience for the air quality index of the apocalypse.
From the fire smoke. Great. But you see what I'm saying? It's like, they didn't really think that islands were literally like floating on water. Did they understand that it was on magma that was shifting? They had no idea.
No, they didn't understand any of this. So they knew that there were earthquakes that seemed to move things slightly around, and so they thought that's how islands might have broken up or shifted a little bit. But they had no idea that it looked as wildly different once upon a time as it does now. And so the idea that there would have been enough drift didn't make any sense. There had to be something that was once between them that sunk, and that was Lemuria.
And they believed this into the early 1900s.
Mid 1900s.
All right.
Mid.
Wow.
It wasn't until radar technology could scan the ocean floor and prove what had been hypothesized for a little while at that point, but not very long, about plate tectonics, that they realized continental drift at an extreme degree was a thing, and therefore there was no need for a theory about Lemuria. Those two pieces could have very easily been actually connected.
Kelly, you're saying the quiet part loud again.
I'm sorry.
You just said that there's no Lemuria.
No.
What are we going to do?
No,
for
wait.
4 episodes?
Byron, you're on such a roller coaster. You just got to hang on, okay? So now we're up to the 1950s and there's no Lemuria. The problem is, at that point, 100 years, mainstream science, the horse is out of the barn. And Lemuria had worked its way into so many different elements of society. There was no getting it back, okay? It was now a thing, and to deny it was a virtual impossibility. Complete side note, but important to your point, that I just said Lemuria didn't exist. Full circle. In the last 5 years, the idea of a bridge between India and Madagascar that existed but sunk is now totally back in the game.
Don't believe it.
Forbes article and BBC article about a lost continent found under the island Mauritius.
Fake news.
Now, it wasn't nearly as big as the one imagined by Sclater and his previous scientists that he stole from.
Of course not.
But
It's not a continent. It's
the
not...
funny thing is, if you read these articles, which of course you will link in the show notes at this episode of Frightday.com, they talk about how this land bridge had never been named before. They aren't even acknowledging that this is exactly what Lemuria was.
I wouldn't say it's exactly.
It's pretty much exactly. It's fucking hilarious.
It's interesting.
But the point is, now, current day, 2022, they do think that there was a landmass between the two islands. It's just no longer called Lemuria because they didn't remember that Sclater and his boys called it Lemuria back in the day. Now, what exactly did Lemuria influence during its 100 years of commonly accepted scientific reign? Well, influenced religion, the Nazis, terrorists, prospectors, Byron, of particular interest to you, the I Am cult,
I do like
and my personal favorite, aliens.
aliens.
Are you excited about all the places that Lemuria is going to take us?
Yeah, I better be.
Now,
Hard swallow.
to tell the story of all of these random paths that Lemuria took us down, we're going to get back to the 1860s. Immediately after Sclater released this, there was another scientist by the name of Ernst Haeckel. He really liked the idea that Sclater threw out there. And according to some accounts, he actually threw the idea out there before Sclater, just like that Etienne fellow had. He just didn't have a cool name for it, and Sclater beat him to the punch for actually getting publicity for it. Any way you look at it, there were plenty of scientists looking at this idea back then. Haeckel just jumped on the bandwagon after Sclater's publishing came out. It's important to consider him when we discuss the birth and growth of the idea of Lemuria, because a mere 5 years before Sclater plagiarized this idea of a sunken land bridge continent, there was a theory that came out that greatly upset Ernst Haeckel. It also happened to completely rewrite our understanding of human history, a little piece called On the Origin of the Species by a Mr. Charles Darwin. Byron, are you familiar with this one?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the fish with feet on the backs of cars. It's the same guy, right?
It is the same guy. He actually designed those, even though there weren't cars yet. He did design those.
He
Yeah,
put those
he was
on the
very
back of
good
a
at
buggy.
branding.
Yeah. Little
was part of
chrome
his-
fish on the back of a buggy.
Part of his branding deck.
Nice.
The world was on fire, how about yours, with buzz about whether Darwin's natural selection was the real deal or a passing trend. And as the idea took hold, the age-old question of all non-literal interpreters of the Bible became front and center: where did humans come from?
Are you asking me?
No, I'm saying that's what people were asking.
Oh.
Enter our friend, Haeckel, who we probably shouldn't call a friend for reasons that will become obvious. He was a German biologist, threw his hat in the ring in 1870 with a book of his own, History of Creation, boldly hypothesized, suggested is a better word because I believe it can only be a hypothesis if it can be tested, and I'm not sure that this one can really be tested, that A, Lemuria, not Mesopotamia or any place, especially not any place in Africa,
Of course not.
was the birthplace of humanity.
Oh, no.
And B, there were 12 varieties of men who sprang forth from the primates of Lemuria. Now, if Al Bielek can get lost in eugenics and Nazism on his way to the USS Eldridge, you can see how the second one can get problematic really quickly in the world of high strangeness. So before we go there, here's Haeckel's quote specifically.
The probable primeval home, or paradise, is here assumed to be Lemuria, a tropical continent at present lying below the level of the Indian Ocean, the former existence of which in the tertiary period seems very probable from numerous facts in an animal and vegetable geography.
Perspective's important here. At this point, we had discovered a teeny tiny percentage of the fossil record that we now have discovered. I also like to point out that it is very likely that there will be incredibly life-changing, perspective-changing discoveries in the next 100 years as well. But at this point, Haeckel could very well have been motivated by racism.
I mean, I'm looking at his map of 12.
The 12 races?
Yeah.
Oh, the 12 races, real problematic. But
I'm not a fan.
just because I am trying to be impartial,
The Australians are their own race?
human fossils had not yet been found in Africa at the point that he put this out. It was Darwin's theory that we came out of Africa. He just didn't like it. Now, whether he didn't like it because there was no fossil evidence or he didn't like it because he was a raging, horrible racist, I don't know. Either way, the point remains that this theory of his was used by many Nazis and Nazi-adjacent groups for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. And
So
I mean,
he
it's
gave
hard
them a
because
seed, regardless.
You can't blame all of these early scientists for what the Nazis picked up and ran with later, but
They ran with a lot.
seems like this guy at the very least.
Now that Lemuria had been promoted from a path for weird-looking ghost primates to cross from one piece of land to another to the actual birthplace of civilization, this is where theories and other aspects of this scientifically viable lost continent blew up. One idea, which we may touch on in a Behind the Screams, was a connection to Tamil nationalists, a group in Sri Lanka. You may have heard of MIA.
I'm familiar with the
Yeah.
performing artist, MIA.
She was Tamil, is. Again, though, I don't think we have time to get into that too much. So as these theories about Lemuria were beginning to settle into the general cultural awareness and accepted fact of our evolution as human beings, we were also rolling through a period called spiritualism, which we have talked about quite a bit on this show, Byron. Can you give our listeners a couple sentence description of what the spiritualist movement was?
kind of like a new spiritual movement starting in the late 1800s. I don't know, a lot more metaphysical thought, talking to spirits, the other side, that kind of stuff.
I mean, it technically began in the 1840s, picked up steam just around the time this material was becoming pretty accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a woman who emerged in the 1880s.
Don't say it.
I'm sorry, you're going to have to deal with it. Madame Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. She was a Russian aristocrat, or maybe pretended to be a Russian aristocrat. That's a little bit up for debate. Next week, we're going to return to Blavatsky's Lemuria. We're going to discuss the best of her intentions and the worst outcomes of her intentions as they pertain to the birth of the Nazi Party. And Byron, if you're lucky, in the next couple of episodes, we're going to get into some Ascended Masters and the I Am cult.
Okay.
And then for me, we're definitely going to get into a treasure hunt and some aliens.
The up tops.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those guys.
Yep.
I'm pointing up.
Now, I know a lot of people have covered Madame Blavatsky.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try and cut to the chase and really focus on some of the other elements.
You could do a 10-parter on Blavatsky.
Very
and
easily.
everyone would be sleeping to it.
I don't know. I've listened to a lot of that. It's pretty entertaining. I mean, Theosophy became a pretty damn big thing as a religion, essentially. I mean, they tried to say it wasn't, but it was a religion. For all intents and purposes, she created it. So she's important for good and bad reasons. But we're going to talk about her. We may throw some Fox sisters in the mix even, Byron.
Okay.
Just for you. Just a little teaser here so that you don't get too bored as we wade through the Blavatsky stuff next week.
Thank you.
This is why you need to understand that she's actually pretty interesting, because she believed, Byron, that Lemuria had been home to a race of hermaphroditic, egg-laying, four-armed giants with psychic powers. So put a pin in that.
I mean, I know what you're talking
keep your
about.
interest in Blavatsky alive.
Wow, great. Kelly, thank you.
You're so welcome.
For doing this again.
You bet. I feel like it was better.
Well, yeah, it had to be because you weren't... Okay, there she goes. Imagine me pushing through that, folks. It's going to be a fun month.
It's going to be a great month.
Jam-packed with Lemuria. But Kelly, until then, I mean, obviously, I know what you're going to be doing.
I'm going to be collecting data, reading about Lemuria, and I'm going to be on Twitter at Kelly Frightday.
Yep.
Email me, kelly@frightday.com.
And I'm at Byron McKoy on Twitter and Instagram, byron@frightday.com. That's my email address. And until next Frightday, I'm Byron.
I'm Kelly.
I'm Helena Blavatsky.
4-armed, egg-laying, hermaphroditic, psychically powered giants?
Stay You've been listening to an Audio Wool original, produced by Byron McKoy, theme music provided by Cemeteries. For more programs like this, visit audiowool.co.